Welcome to the Explainer. So today, we're going to explore the surprising and honestly sometimes completely counterintuitive chemical reactions that everyday liquids trigger right inside our digestive systems. You know, we kind of take eating and drinking for granted, but every single time you swallow, you're kicking off this highly complex, invisible cascade of biological events.
Let's start our journey with a pretty relatable question. Can a regular old glass of water or milk actually change how your body processes pain and medicine? Now, I know it sounds like a bit of a stretch, but as we're about to see through some really fascinating clinical data, every single sip you take dictates a massive biological response inside you. The state of what you consume, whether it's liquid or solid, water or dairy, can literally be the difference between immediate relief and prolonged agony.
All right, Section 1. The mouth, soothing spice.
Okay, let's dive into this by starting right in the mouth, dealing with an experience I'm sure we have all had at least once, the fiery regret of a spicy meal. The absolute culprit behind that burning prickle in your mouth, or, worse, your eyes, is a chemical called capsaicin. It's an irritant found in all varieties of chili peppers, and the intensity of this heat is measured by Scoville heat units, or SHUs. Basically, the higher the SHU, the more capsaicin the pepper packs, and the more aggressive that burning sensation feels on your nerve receptors.
Now, when your mouth is just on fire from a high Scoville pepper, human instinct screams at you to reach for a glass of ice-cold water, right? But clinical data, including this really comprehensive study that actually compared 7 different beverages, proves that animal milk is the true chemical champion here. While rinsing your mouth with anything is, for sure, better than nothing, only milk and certain high-sugar drinks noticeably outperform plain old water. But why is that?
Well, this brilliantly illustrates exactly why water fails. Capsaicin is an oil-based molecule. It just doesn't dissolve in water. It's like if you try to wash a really greasy skillet with cold water, right? The grease just smears around. But milk contains a protein called casein, and casein acts exactly like dish soap. It actively binds to those capsaicin molecules, breaks them apart, and literally washes them away from your pain receptors. But, quick side note here, this requires animal milk. Plant-based substitutes like almond or oat milk, they don't have casein, so they aren't going to help you fight the spice.
Moving down, Section 2, the stomach, quelling acid.
So as we travel further down the gastrointestinal tract into the stomach, spicy foods often leave a lingering mark in the form of acid reflux and indigestion. Now, what's really fascinating here is the callback to our spice remedy. While a glass of milk was your absolute best friend when your mouth was burning, it suddenly becomes your enemy down in the stomach. If you've got a roiling stomach or acid reflux after eating that spicy curry, chugging milk can actually worsen the symptoms. It stimulates your stomach to produce even more acid to digest the dairy, basically trapping you in this painful cycle. Plus, if you're among the estimated 36% of Americans who are lactose intolerant, you're just adding cramps and bloating to the whole shebang. Instead, the science says you should definitely reach for a calcium carbonate antacid to neutralize the burn.
And speaking of neutralizing stomach acid, a really fascinating crossover study published in Digestive Diseases and Sciences tracked what is essentially a staggering race. They looked at how quickly different substances can make a stomach less acidic, specifically raising the gastric pH above a level of 4 in healthy subjects. And traditional medicines? They take a shockingly long time. Ranitidine takes 50 minutes. Heavy-duty proton pump inhibitors like esomeprazole and omeprazole take over 2.5 hours to start working. But the winner of this race is entirely unexpected.
Wait for it, 1 minute. So the crucial point here is that a simple 200 milliliter glass of plain water immediately neutralized stomach acid in healthy subjects in just 60 seconds. Now, there is a catch. While water is incredibly fast, the relief only lasted a brief 3 minutes. Antacids took 2 minutes to work and lasted for 12 minutes. The pharmaceutical drugs took hours to kick in, but their relief, of course, lasted until the end of the recording period. But hey, if you need instant, momentary relief from a sudden spike in stomach acid, a quick glass of water is biologically faster than anything you've got in your medicine cabinet.
All right, on to Section 3, the intestines, absorbing medicine.
Continuing our anatomical descent, we arrive at the intestines. And here, the physical state of the meals you eat, whether it's a liquid or a solid, dictates exactly how your body absorbs vital drugs. When comparing human intestinal fluids, researchers found a massive difference between eating a liquid meal versus a solid meal. For the solid meal, they used an FDA standard breakfast featuring bacon, eggs, and toast. Researchers aspirated human intestinal fluids over time to see how the physical form of these meals totally altered the composition of the gut, specifically looking at things like lipids, bile salts, and cholesterol.
The process unfolds like a giant biological puzzle. Because solid meals require so much mechanical breakdown, think about all that heavy chewing and the churning in the stomach. They empty much slower. A liquid meal empties rapidly and steadily, but a solid meal just drips slowly into the intestines. And because of this slow drip, the peak concentrations of dietary lipids in your gut are actually much lower after a solid meal than after a liquid one. And this directly leads to a diminished capacity for your intestinal fluids to actually dissolve certain types of drugs.
As this graph maps out, because of that slow drip, a solid meal results in a much slower, lower peak in exogenous components, like those dietary lipids and proteins we just talked about, compared to a liquid meal, which spikes rapidly in the gut. Interestingly though, your body's own endogenous components, like bile salts, remain somewhat similar between the two meal types, though they do peak slightly later with the solid meal.
Ultimately, what does this all mean? Well, it proves exactly why the way we test and consume drugs matters so much. A solid meal actually diminishes your body's ability to solubilize and absorb poorly water-soluble lipophilic drugs. Lipophilic literally means fat-loving. These medications need high concentrations of lipids in the gut to dissolve properly. So, because a solid meal drips slowly into the intestine, it doesn't provide that huge, immediate rush of lipids that a liquid meal does. Meaning, if you take a fat-loving medication with a solid meal, your body might not absorb it nearly as effectively as it would if you took it with a liquid meal. It entirely changes the pharmaceutical math. Okay, wrapping up with Section 4, the final digestion takeaway.
Before we finish our anatomical journey today, let's distill all of this incredible gastrointestinal chemistry into a few practical, everyday safety tips. Whether you're prepping a meal or dealing with a fiery aftermath, keep these rules in mind. First, always wear gloves when handling hot peppers and wash your hands thoroughly with soap. Remember, capsaicin is oil-based, water just won't cut it. Second, if you do get capsaicin in your mouth or accidentally rub it in your eyes, safely use animal milk to flush it out. The casein will neutralize the burn without harming your eyes. And finally, remember that while dairy saves your mouth, it totally punishes your stomach. Reach for a calcium carbonate antacid instead of milk if the spice gives you a bellyache.
This really leaves us with a fascinating perspective, doesn't it? We often just think of food and drink as basic fuel, but they are powerful chemical catalysts. From the casein in milk acting as a targeted molecular soap in your mouth, to a simple glass of water acting as a 1-minute acid neutralizer, to the sheer physical density of your breakfast dictating how well a life-saving drug absorbs in your intestines, how will the very next bite or sip you take quietly change the chemical cascade inside your body? Think about that the next time you sit down for a meal. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the science of the everyday.